Today, we're diving into a really fascinating theory, one that suggests some of the world's most ancient spiritual stories aren't actually about history at all. Instead, it proposes they're a kind of roadmap for a powerful process happening inside the human body, maybe even inside you right now.
So let's just jump right in with the big central question. What if one of the most famous stories in human history isn't about something that happened 2,000 years ago, but an event that happens, like clockwork, every single month inside of us?
So, where does this idea even come from? Well, it starts with a really interesting clue hidden in the language. The place of the crucifixion, Golgotha or Calvary, literally translates to the place of the skull. The thinking here is that this isn't a location on a map, it's a direct reference to our own anatomy, the very stage where this whole internal drama plays out.
And, proponents of this theory don't just pull this out of thin air. They point to Scripture itself. A passage like this one is seen not as a nice metaphor, but as a literal biological statement. The mystery, they say, is that the Christ is a substance that is literally in you. And that simple idea sets the stage for this entire internal journey.
Okay, so if this story is happening inside of us, who are the main characters? Let's take a look at the divine anatomy, the key players in this process, all of which, according to this interpretation, are right there in your brain and nervous system. All right, our journey starts in a little-known part of the brain called the claustrum. Now, neurologically, it's this thin sheet of neurons that some scientists think might be the very seat of consciousness. But in this story, it has another role. And get this, the theory draws a pretty wild parallel between claustrum and Santa Claus, suggesting this is where a sacred, life-giving gift is made before it's sent down the chimney of the spine into the body. And that gift? It's a substance the theory calls the Sacred Secretion, or the Christ oil. This is the hero of our story. It's described as the special fluid that comes from the claustrum and starts a pretty amazing journey down and, if all goes right, back up the central nervous system. Now, this is where things get really symbolic. Other parts of the brain are given these epic roles. You have the pineal gland, which is seen as the masculine Joseph energy, producing a golden substance called honey. And then you have the pituitary gland, the feminine Mary energy, producing a whitish substance called milk. And together, they create the biblical land of milk and honey right inside your own head. Okay, so we have the oil, it's been created. What happens next? Well, now we follow its first big journey, as described in this theory, the descent. This is the path it takes from the brain all the way down to the base of the spine. Let's trace this path. So first, the oil is born from the claustrum. Then it travels down the spinal cord until it reaches the solar plexus. And this is a huge connection in the theory, because it says the solar plexus is the biblical Bethlehem. And that's where the oil becomes a seed. From there, it keeps going down until it comes to rest in the sacrum, which literally means the sacred bone. But, and this is a huge but, for the oil to make its return trip, for the story to be completed, it has to be preserved. The theory argues that our lifestyle, our choices, and our actions directly decide if this precious substance gets wasted or saved for its true purpose. So how do you preserve it? Well, this is where the theory maps these ideas onto something you've probably heard of, the 7 deadly sins. From this point of view, things like gluttony or lust or getting angry all the time aren't just moral problems. No, they're described as actual physical actions that spend or use up this sacred secretion, stopping it from ever completing its journey back up. So, if you manage to preserve the oil, it can finally begin the most important, most critical part of its journey, the ascent. This is the path to real transformation, leading to what the theory calls the internal crucifixion. And this entire phase, it all revolves around one single number, 33. So why 33? Well, the core of the idea is the 33 vertebrae of the human spine. That's the ladder that the oil has to climb. But then it gets deeper. It connects to the age of Christ at the crucifixion, the 33 degrees of Freemasonry, and so on. It's presented as this kind of master number that links our biology directly to these big spiritual ideas. So picture this. The preserved oil starts its climb from the sacrum, right at the base of the spine. It moves up through the solar plexus, again, then past the cardiac plexus near the heart, until it finally arrives at the throat area. And this brings us to the site of the crucifixion, the vagus nerve, which is fascinating, because that nerve network is sometimes called the tree of life in anatomy. Now, in this context, crucified does not mean to be killed. The theory completely redefines it. It means to be magnified, amplified, refined. The oil gets transformed basically into a higher state of being. And this transformation, it's said to take a very specific amount of time, 2.5 days. And yes, that's meant to be a direct parallel to the time Jesus was said to have spent in the tomb before his resurrection. This quote from Romans really captures the vibe of this stage. The whole point is to not give in to those lower urges, to not be conformed to this world, but instead to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. During these 2.5 days, you have to resist those temptations to let the refinement process finish. Okay, so after the crucifixion comes the resurrection. This final part of the story is all about what happens when that transformed oil finishes its journey and reaches its final incredible destination. So after 2.5 days, the newly refined oil travels up across a part of the brainstem called the pons. And that name is just perfect because pons literally means bridge in Latin. It crosses this bridge, moving out of the nervous system and into the very center of the brain. The final stop on this whole journey is the optic thalamus. And get this, the ancient Greeks apparently called this the light of the world. This is the throne room. When the refined oil finally arrives here, it's said to switch on dormant brain cells, leading to a state of true enlightenment. So what's the ultimate payoff? What's the divine outcome of this whole internal process? Well, the source describes it as a complete personal upgrade. We're talking about a crystal clear sense of vision and purpose, insane enthusiasm and motivation, supercharged intuition, and just an overwhelming feeling of peace, love, and healing. Basically, it's the full activation of your highest potential. And that really leaves us with this final thought. This whole theory weaves together our anatomy, scripture, and ancient mysticism into this incredible internal map. It asks us to consider that maybe the greatest stories ever told weren't about what's happening up in the heavens, but about the godlike power that's waiting to be awakened inside our own bodies. Could this internal journey be the real, hidden path to our divine potential? That's something to think about.